Hello and welcome back to the show. It's time for our top story. Now, one anonymous writer had once said that a young man invests his money and time in real estate. We're looking today deeply into real estate and property ownership. And to do this with us, we have a lawyer who was here a while ago to discuss wills. We discussed it extensively and we expect to have a repetition, if not something better. We have the person of Barrister Chukwuma. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thanks for joining us in Hello, Nigeria.
Hello, thank you for coming. Now we're looking at real estate and property law. Perhaps for those who are watching out there, when you talk about real estate, what does it entail?
Real estate simply concerns properties, as you would think. When you talk of properties too, you have what you call real properties, and then you also have personal properties. Real properties are usually the ones you have like buildings, land, because property connotes ownership of something that is outside you, particularly land, cars, but the real estate aspect of it becomes the land and anything fixed permanently on land. That's a simple definition of it.
So by anything fixed permanently means anything that cannot be detached. For example, a property, a house built on the land is part of the real estate. You know, when you see anything that cannot be detached.
Yes, generally, when you see anything that cannot easily be detached, let me put it that way. Because when you look at land, you have trees on land. It's part of real estate because it's relatively permanently on land. You have buildings that are there, and you have things that are fixed on those, with like windows and some of the things that you cannot just easily detach without necessarily doing a little violence on that land. So they all are part of what you call real property.
So why is it important for individuals to understand property law and the legal aspect of real estate while making a purchase decision?
Yes, real property, real estate is very important for people to understand because it has complex laws. Remember that it's ownership. In fact, about
it's not just like going to ShopRite.
It's not just like going to ShopRite to buy your ice cream or buy your jewelry and things like that. But it is something that is very important. And most of our income, most of the income you have are really attached to these, are usually used for these real properties because that's what actually gives you shelter. That's what sometimes gives you income and so many things. That is why it's very important. So every state would normally be interested in how do you manage these properties? How do you transfer ownership of these properties? How do you own it? We should be able to also look at what are private properties and what are public properties. What laws are governing private properties? What laws are governing public properties? The real estate also will also include the type of registrations. If you are buying, what do you look out for? If you want to own or acquire, what do you look out for? Whether you are buying in the commercial areas or in the towns or cities, or whether you are buying in the rural areas, or rather whether you are planning to acquire. Let's not just say buying, because if it's inheritance, it's also part of acquisition,
yes,
but not necessarily buying. So he has a lot of things to understand. It's a really very important, one of the oldest parts of the law. The law actually started from that area because that is where we started. You think of
disputes in land matters.
Disputes in land matters, disputes that comes up, tenancy, the old system of tenancy, the type of tenancy we have today,
I'm glad you mentioned tenancy. I mean, just before we go, because we're looking at real estate generally, let's look at tenancy. A number of tenants who, you hear, I was watching a documentary about an event in other parts of the world, and we're talking about the fact that tenants have rights. So, number one, the landlord has to write to you when he's coming to visit and must give you a month's notice before they must come and visit you. Do we have such laws to protect tenants in Nigeria? So we hear of the fact that they've banned, asking for a 2-year upfront rent. Some people are still asking for that, so some people do not know that they have rights in that area. So do we have rights for tenants, and what are some of those common laws?
Yes, in anything you have interest in, certainly there will be rights. Just think of it from that way. If you pay rent for a house, you have a right because it is your money. So within the period of the payment of your rent, you have almost absolute right to the property, subject to certain few rights by the landlord. So you also have right of possession because you are in possession of the property.
For a period of
For that period of time you have paid. And the Constitution also gave you right of privacy. It's a constitutionally protected right, privacy. Therefore, somebody cannot invade into your privacy simply because he has what you call residual rights over the property. But the right, the active right over the property is by you who has paid and you who is also in effective possession.
But oftentimes we've heard tales of tenants from hell. They call them that landlords find it very hard to eject, even after their lease period has expired. What kind of right is this? Is it a right for them to remain there permanently and then you have court cases and you have to beg them to leave? Sometimes they stay for upwards of 3-4 years in some cases.
Yes, I think it's also...
Is the law more favorable towards a tenant than the landlord?
No, the law, the law, when you look at sometimes you see the blind woman holding the scale. The law tries to tilt and look at each party and then get it right. First is, the landlord has his own rights. The tenants have their own rights. Now, once your tenancy has expired, you become a tenant as sufferance. You're no longer a tenant. Part of the problems we have is that sometimes because of our slow judiciary system, people can take advantage of the slow judiciary system. Some judiciary systems are now getting up to its responsibilities. It shouldn't take more than 3 months to remove somebody from the house. And there are some of the issues people think that if notice to quit has been given to you, you don't have to pay rent. It's a fallacy. We don't know where that one is coming from. Once your tenancy has been determined, you become tenancy. In fact, once you can determine your tenancy by not paying, because once the payment has expired, your tenancy has actually determined. And many judges now take it up. Once a lawyer applies, you have not paid. Provided it's not the landlord that impeded you from paying or from renewing according to the contract. People don't look at these contracts. A lot of us, what we do is want to get a house. We ask a lawyer. We don't ask a lawyer. We ask the landlord lawyer, give us anything. And sometimes some of the landlord's lawyers do not understand the rights of the landlord. So they do not clearly protect the rights of the landlord in a document. Once it's not protected, we start having these issues. But once it's protected, you have the tenancy tenure, you have how to determine it. Once it's properly determined, the magistrate or the high court judge should, as quick as possible, give effect to it. And the person should know that even if it takes time, the person will still have to pay.
Okay. So now let's come back to land and property. Now, the people who purchase land, and we know that one of the most commonly complained about issues with regards to purchase of land would be trespass. And lots of people complain about the land grabbers, the omoniles.
Yes.
Now, what are the certain things that people can do to protect their land, to establish ownership over their land after having purchased the land?
Yes, first thing that we always advise people is to ensure possession. As you're buying the land, ensure possession. And possession can be in many ways. You can possess through somebody, you can put somebody there, you can be farming there, but you must ensure possession first. But secondly is, sometimes when we buy, what we do is just like some lawyers, or rather some prospective buyers of property, they will ask, oh, I've seen this property, I've conducted a search, I have finished, just do the agreement for me. The fact of having an agreement does not necessarily give you possession of the land and does not in itself confirm that the land is good to buy or the property is good to buy. There are many other searches that a competent lawyer should be able to do to ensure that you have relatively free buying or that you're not buying trouble for yourself. So these are the basic things somebody should look at.
Does erecting something on the land, even if you're not possessing it, does erecting something on the land also amount to some form of showing your ownership? So like maybe erecting fences and all that?
Oh, sure. I even said even farming on the land.
At what point do you get a CFO?
The CFO, ordinarily, like Lagos State will tell you that you should get it within 90 days. Sometimes it takes 1 year, sometimes it takes 2 years. Also dependent on who is working on it. But then once you apply and then you move on, it's okay. Once search on the land is properly done, and you apply and you're in possession and you continue, you wouldn't be a problem. So you can't really say you must get it, but the minimum is 90 days. That's what one can give you in Lagos. Minimum day, minimum time. The same thing.
And it varies from state to state. I presume. It varies from state to state.
Oh, sure. It varies from state to state. It varies also on how states manage their system. You know, some states are too archaic. You can do it for 7 years in some states. And this is part of our economic problems in Nigeria. And you said some of these politicians, what are they doing?
Circumvent that process. So can you apply to a higher, can you sue the state to court for delay in giving you that certificate because you've done your own part? Because this is almost human failing in quotes, or a system failing. And if you need your documents urgently, is there a way you can sue the state, take the state to court?
Oh, sure. You can actually sue the states. But the problem we still have is that we need to get the government right. We also need to get our court systems right. But if, for instance, when you're suing for somebody not doing a particular thing, sometimes you have to show the damages you suffered. Oh, yeah. If, for instance, you wanted to, you have to show the damages in order to be able. You can also sue, you can sue and say a declaration and an order compelling the state to issue you with your certificate of occupancy. You know, that's one. You can also sue for damages if you have, if there are damages maybe as a result of the fact you were looking for a loan, it was not given to you, or it was not given to you because of the fact that you didn't get. So you must establish some form of damages following why it should be.
As a follow-up to Ayo's question, talking about circumventing, ways to go around these laws, would you say that the provision of the Land Use Act that says that all lands belong to the governor, would you say that that's been a major problem? Because there's been a major argument with regards to that section. Some people are of the view that it should be reviewed and expunged from the Land Use Act, and all lands being placed in the ownership of the governor is a major problem with regards to people being able to own lands and get a certificate of occupancy.
No, I think it's one of the best things that have happened to the land system. When you look at the philosophy behind all lands belonging to the government, it simply means that if the government needs land for public purposes, it shouldn't have so much problem. Just like we're talking about railway now. Yeah. If land belongs to you, they come to your land, you tell them it's 1 trillion. If they don't want, let them go. Meanwhile, the railway is going to benefit all of us, maybe excluding you, because you think it may not benefit you. But if it belongs to the government, it means you're a tenant of the government. Now, the Land Use Act, even saying that it belongs to the government, the Land Use Act also said that if you are in possession for any reason of the land, before the coming into effect of that act, that you actually have what you call a deemed statutory right of occupancy. So it means that government has actually given it to you. You have rights accruing as a result of your having it. So the governor owning the land is a technical issue. You actually own the land. You actually own the land. And remember, it is the governor, not Ambode. You understand?
So
it's government. That means you actually own it. It's a public property. You actually own it because you're part
So we all own it.
We all
so
own
in the
it.
case that, like you use the example of railway, if there's an infrastructure project and your house is on the right of way, how do you determine compensation, and what determines what is good enough? It's
all of us that are still going to pay the compensation. That's one thing we need to understand. When we say we want a stadium, we want road to pass through a particular place, and somebody's house and my house is, for instance, blocking the way, it's all of us that are going to still pay that compensation. So what we simply do is to say, value the property. Valuation comes in. Once the valuation is made, then there will be some minor inconveniences that all of us are going to pay, including me. Remember that the money is being paid from both my tax money and your own tax money. So there are the cost of the property will be known. And then maybe there may be a little minor, things that could be done. That's
for compensation.
But that's the way it's done.
All right. So we must understand this, because a number of people complain, or you see the government taking over a property and you think, that's unfair, this is wicked. But if you understand that there's a provision for it in the law, like Olive mentioned, that all lands belong to the government really. So at the end of the day, it's for the benefit of the good of the people that we must allow it to happen. Yes. We have so many questions for you, but as always, we don't have enough time to deal with those questions. Yes. We do encourage and welcome questions from the audience via our social media handle at Wazobia Max. Use the hashtag Hello Nigeria, because I know that some people might have specific questions to ask you.
Before we go, can I ask him a last question?
No,
I also
unfortunately,
have
we
a
don't
last
have any
question.
time for more questions. We have to go, but we have to bring you back, as you can see, to ask you more questions and to enlighten us more. We've only scratched the surface, really, so we look forward to having you again. Thank you, Barrister Ezeala. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, ladies and
To enjoy more of these our Ogbonge videos when you just watch, press this button to subscribe on top of our YouTube page. You go love am.